We'll be looking at creating interaction and how we can create interaction on page elements. So selecting an element, tracking the click on the element, the mouse down and mouse up, so what the difference between those and click is. Also mouse over and mouse out. So we're tracking a counter whenever we move over that element, we get the mouse over. Whenever we move out, we get the mouse out firing. So those are the events that are firing. The click is going to be tracked on the mouse down. So right now I'm holding the mouse key down. Once I release it, we get the mouse up, and we also get the clicked event firing. And because I also moved the mouse out, I get the mouse out event firing. Then we're just updating the text content of the output element from the HTML page. This lesson we're going to be adding interaction to the page elements. So go over to the HTML file, and within the page element attribute, we can add a click event using the onClick, and then this can run a function. So let's create a function, give it a name, and then this is what we're going to be running. So we'll call it output. So whenever the H1 element gets clicked, we're going to run the function output. Right now we haven't defined that function. So going into the code, creating the function output, and for now we'll just type into the console and we'll just call it clicked. So every time that element gets clicked, we can run the function. Now there are issues when you are adding it in as an attribute, and generally this should be avoided, as we can select the element and then we can also add the click event onto the element within the JavaScript code. And this is going to provide a much neater way in order to write the code. So let's go ahead and go back into the page, and we want to select the element, and the element that we're selecting, so using the document and then query selector. So one of the selection ways of selecting the element, in this case we'll select the element with the H1, and in order to make it clickable, since we've got the element object, we can add the onClick event. So this is the event, and it's the same as what we just did within the attributes, and it's expecting to have a function on the other side. So if we want to assign the function of output, we can assign it this way. We can also do the anonymous function, where we've got the function here, and then this can run and have a click, create a variable, can use as a counter. So starting it out at 0. So every time the element gets clicked, we'll increment the counter by 1. And then within the console, we're going to write the result of the counter. So outputting the counter value into the console as a string value. So every time we click it, we get a new click value being set to it. We can also select the other page elements. So we have an element with a class of output. So we'll go ahead and we'll select that, and using the variable name of element2 query selector, select the element with a class of output. And instead of typing it and writing into the console, let's go ahead and we're going to update the element and update the text content of the element to read the number of times it's been clicked. So this way we get a tracker that when we click, this is being updated. We can do it either with the output, or we can have the console there with the output. And we can also add in an event listener on the element 2 as well. So using the onClick event, let's go ahead and we're going to add in the output function. So we get both examples. So either one that we click, it's going to do the same, where it increments the counter when the element event is triggered, and then it's going to output the result. There's also different events that we can use. So one of them is the onLoad event. So this gets fired off whenever the page loads and whenever the element loads. And you might see it as an onLoad attribute, and then whatever function we want to run. So in this case, instead of having it there, we're going to load it, and whenever the document body loads, then we're going to run that function. So that's going to be contained within the document body, and we can select the document body and then add the onLoad function and have an anonymous function. When we're output into the console, whenever the body has loaded, we'll write ready into the console. So when the document body, and we've selected the document body, you can add it to other events as well. There's also different mouse events. So we can have a mouse over or a mouse out event. There's also mouse down, mouse up, and on click events. So The mouse up and mouse down are very similar to the click. Whenever the mouse is pressed, that fires the mouse down. Whenever the mouse is released, that's going to fire the mouse up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add those to element 1, where we've got the on mouse down event. And whenever this gets clicked, then we'll run the anonymous function, and this will output within the console mouse down. Or we'll actually update it within the text, where we'll have a value of mouse down, and I'm going to create a function in order to create the output. I'll call it adder, and I'll take in a value, and then this value is what we're going to add. So that way we can streamline and set the value and include that in the output that we're writing into the element. So whenever the mouse down gets fired, do the mouse down within the adder. So that's the variable that we'll send. Here we'll have a click. And just check to see how that's working. So mouse down gets fired when I'm holding the mouse down. And then when I let up, that's where we get the click. So we get the clicked firing after the mouse down. I'm also going to output these into the console, so it's a little bit easier to see what we're tracking and what events are occurring. So we see that we get the ready loads, the mouse down, and then the clicked. So whenever I'm clicking on the element. Let's also add in the mouse up. And these are just different ways that you can check to see at what point the mouse action was taking. So now we're going to have the mouse up. And this is going to fire whenever I release. So next is going to be the mouse up, and then the whole action is going to be the clicked action. So we can track on specifics, or we can track on that whole action. Values where we can have a mouse over and a mouse out. So let's go ahead and we're going to add those values in. So this is whenever this gets triggered whenever the mouse cursor is on top of that particular element. So update it, and it's called on mouse over. And then there's on mouse out. So whenever you leave the page element, that's when the out is going to fire. So we've got the over, and then we also are going to have the out. So whenever we're over it, mouse over fires. Whenever we leave, the mouse out fires. So whenever we click down, release, click up, and then the clicked event. So these are the different events that are commonly added, and there's a whole bunch more different types of event listeners that can be added using the mouse. Try it out and add in the different mouse events, and you'll be ready to move on to the next lesson.